Next question, is it permissible to build churches and Hindu temples in the Arabian Peninsula? What are the borders of the Arabian Peninsula? Is the UAE part of the Arabian Peninsula? Did the madhab of the Ahnaf allow the building of churches in the Arabian Peninsula? First of all, it's not permitted to build any new places of shirk, churches, synagogues, Hindu temples, or anything of that nature in any of the various Muslim territories for any of the various kuffar and mushrikeen. That's whether they were territories that were founded on tawheed from the beginning or conquered peacefully or militarily. It's not permissible to build them on any Muslim territory, not just the Arabian Peninsula. All Muslim lands are equal in this matter. It's not permissible in what they refer to as Qatar or what they refer to as UAE or in Bilad al-Haramain or in Egypt or in Iraq or even in Turkey or even in Andalus or any of the various Muslim territories, even territories that were among the Islamic territories at one point, and now they fall under some type of occupation. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala aid the Muslims to liberate them. Yes, it's more essential that Al-Jazira Al-Arabiya be kept more pure and more protected and fully shielded from kufr and kuffar, but this specific detail is not among the specialties of Al-Jazira Al-Arabiya. Except that it's a bigger crime when it's done inside the borders of Al-Jazira Al-Arabiya, the heart of the Islamic territories. The land that's supposed to be the base and fort of Islam, the land that's supposed to be the refuge for Islam and Muslims. And now instead of being a refuge for the Muslims, it's the land that imprisons them or surrenders them to the most hostile of the kuffar. And instead of being the land that spreads the pure tawheed, it's the land that promotes the kufr of interfaith and wala' to kuffar. Even though it doesn't matter as it pertains to this mas'ala, whether it's in the Arabian Peninsula or outside, all Muslim lands are equal in this matter. I'll still define, as he asked, what are the borders of the Arabian Peninsula. I'll still answer that question because it's something we constantly get asked about. So from the west, the border of Al-Jazira Al-Arabiya is the Red Sea. From the east, it's Al-Khalij Al-Arabi, the Persian Gulf or the Arabian Gulf. From the south, it's the Arabian Sea, which is part of the Indian Ocean near the Gulf of Oman and Aden. And the rajih is that Yemen is included as part of the Arabian Peninsula. So from the west, east, and south, Al-Jazira Al-Arabiya is bordered with the three bodies of water. Now from the north, Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah ta'ala said, it's up to the border of the beginning of Bilad al-Sham. What's Bilad al-Sham? Bilad al-Sham refers to what is today Al-Urdun, Jordan, Syria, Palestine, Lebanon, and a small portion of what's today Iraq, and a small portion of what's today even Turkey, near Antakya. Jordan is the start of Bilad al-Sham from the border of Al-Jazira. Jordan, Al-Urdun, and the rest of Bilad al-Sham behind it, along with Iraq next to it, are not part of Al-Jazira, in the more correct opinion of the many opinions of the ulama on this matter. So the overall summary of the geographic border of Al-Jazira Al-Arabiya is that Al-Jazira Al-Arabiya is the territory that's surrounded by water from the three directions. And then from the land side, it stops at what is Bilad al-Sham, Jordan, and Iraq next to it. The issue pertaining to building places of worship in lands of Muslims is clear and among the clearest matters. So clear, some ulama related an ijma' on it. The Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, and it's among the last of what he sallallahu alayhi wasallam said. And we know when one is on his deathbed and gives advice, it's among the most essential advice. So imagine when it's revelation revealed from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the tongue of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam in his last days on this earth. كان آخر ما تكلم به أن قاتل الله اليهود والنصارى اتخذوا قبور أنبيائهم مساجد لا يبقين دينان بأرض العرب. Said Ahmed, it was among the last of what the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam spoke. Two deens shall not coexist in the lands of the Arab. And more specifically for the Arabian Peninsula, Sahih Muslim. Hadith Umar bin Khattab radiallahu anhu. لأخرجن, the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, لأخرجن اليهود والنصارى من جزيرة العرب حتى لا أدع إلا مسلما. And there's other narrations similar to that. And in Musnad Ahmad, when the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam was asked what he was sent with, he said, I was sent to destroy the idols. وَتُكْسَرَ الْأَوْثَانِ. Other hadith imply this as well. Even if there was no specific hadith on this matter, it wouldn't be needed because it's among the basics. Khamra is haram. It's haram to drink it, to sell it, and to buy it. So do you build a bar for them to drink in it? Zina and prostitution are haram. Do you build a prostitution house for them to commit zina in it? Shirk is the most horrendous sin committed on the face of this earth. Mightier than zina and alcohol and riba combined. Whoever falls into shirk is eternally destined to Jahannam. So how can one think it's permissible for Muslims to build them a cursed, doomed establishment, or to think it's permissible for them to construct it on the lands of the Muslimin? This is such a common matter that I said some ulama related an ijma' on it. And keep in mind, when we speak on this matter, there's a detail that's overlooked. When most of the ulama were talking about this issue, the earlier ulama especially, it was in the context of kuffar living in Muslim lands, building and fixing up their own places of worship. They prohibited that for them, to build them for themselves. It's them building these places of worship with their wealth and money and energy, yet it was still prohibited. Imagine when it's tawaghit who claim to be on tawheed, taking the wealth from the hungry stomachs of this ummah to build places of worship for the various mushrikeen who are hostile towards Islam and Muslimin. Among the ulama who related an ijma' on this matter is the Subki. He said there's ijma' that it's prohibited to build or renovate or fix or update or maintain a church. And of course, when you say a church, it includes other places of worship just like it for the mushrikeen in kuffar. Az-Zayla'i, who is a Hanafi, related an ijma' on this matter. He said kuffar living under Muslim rule in Muslim lands, if they wish to build places of worship, they are not permitted to do so by ijma'. And Al-Insaf and Al-Furu', they related that Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah ta'ala mentioned an ijma' on this matter as well. In Mukhtasar al-Fatawa al-Masriya, he said, لا يجوز تجديد الكنيسة باتفاق المسلمين. And back in the days when Sheikh Bakr Abu Zayd was active in what they call the big ulama in Bilad al-Haramain, around the year 1420 or 1421, this matter was so obvious that they themselves even related in ijma' prohibiting this matter. They said permitting and accepting places of worship for kuffar, like churches, or having specialized, designated places of worship for them in any of the Muslim lands is among the mightiest forms of aiding kufr and displaying their symbols. What they meant by specialized, designated places is something like what they have of designated prayer areas or the multi-faith prayer areas in hospitals and airports. And they considered that prohibited. Al-Hasan al-Basri said from the sunnah is to destroy the churches in old and new countries. Al-Tartushi in Siraj al-Muluk said Umar ibn Abdul Aziz rahimahullah ta'ala sent an order to his governor Urwa ibn Muhammad, who was his governor in Yemen, that no church or place of worship shall remain in the lands of the Muslims. And his governor, Urwa, carried that order out. Don't forget, الشروط العمرية. When Muslim lands were expanded and they got near Asham, where there's Christians, the Muslims needed to know how to deal with them. So Umar radiallahu anh made a list of rules to govern the relationship as it pertains to Ahl al-Dhimma. And they're referred to as Ash-Shurut Al-Umariyya. Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah ta'ala mentioned them in his book Ahkam Ahl al-Dhimma, and other ulama did as well. Ibn al-Qayyim said their popularity, the popularity of these conditions is more sufficient than its chain. Because the ummah, he said, received these conditions in acceptance and mentioned them in their books and used them as proof, and the khulafa after Umar radiallahu anh abided by them. Among those conditions is that the Nasara, the Christians, are not permitted to build new churches or any place of worship in the lands of the Muslimin. Some ulama from the Hanabila, Malikiyya, and others went to the point of discussing or disputing the slight detail of allowing them to restore and repair portions of their places of worship if they decay over time. Subki said, بناء الكنيسة حرام بالإجماع وكذا ترميمها. Restoration and renovation and repair is haram. And that's the more correct opinion on that detail. All four madhahib, without a doubt, agree on the prohibition of building any place of worship for kuffar and mushrikeen in Muslim territories. Malik, Shafi'i, Ahmad, rahimahumullah, the madhab of the Ahnaf, all have specific statements on this issue. It's the opinion of all four madhahib, without a doubt. Now the question is, did the madhab of the Ahnaf allow building of churches in the Arabian Peninsula? Before I discuss that part of the question, that final part of the question, for one to leave the clear proofs on this matter, so clear, some ulama related in ijma', to leave the agreement of the four madhahib on a clear matter that's backed by proof, to leave the statements of the Sahaba. There's a statement by Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu in Ash-Shurut Al-Umariyya by Umar, the enormous, overwhelming statements of other various ulama, then come to a statement attributed to Abu Hanifa, not the madhab. Rest assured, who does that is a person who has a disease in his heart and he follows, or they follow, their desire. One who continuously searches and follows exceptional opinions, called rukhas al-ulama, inherits akhta' al-ulama, mistakes of the ulama, is a fasiq. Ibn Hazm said, it's by ijma', one who follows the rukhas of the ulama is a fasiq. And we spoke on this, the person who selects opinions that suit his desire many times. Al-Awza'i, rahimahullah ta'ala, said, Man akhadha binawadir al-ulama kharaja min al-Islam. Whoever takes the rare opinions of the ulama leaves Islam, leaves the folds of Islam. What he most likely meant is that it ends up taking him out of Islam. We're talking about rare opinions that have no proof and are clearly wrong, like this matter. As to the opinion of Abu Hanifa, no, it's the opinion of Abu Hanifa, not the opinion of the madhab. The alleged statement is not as broad as they make it. The opinion attributed to Abu Hanifa is that it's okay, supposedly okay, to build churches in small towns that's fully occupied by kuffar with no Muslims amongst them. And it has to be in the outskirts and the small towns. And I remember several brothers asked me how to respond to someone who claims that Abu Hanifa rahmallah said you get ajr for building churches or renovating churches. It's not even what Abu Hanifa rahmallah ta'ala said. Abu Hanifa rahmallah ta'ala distinguishes between the structure and what's done in it. He permits a Muslim to build the structure in the conditions we meant, that it be in the outskirts with no Muslims. because he separates between that and the act itself. The building is one thing according to him. What's committed in it is another. And that's nearly identical or similar to his other erroneous opinion, rahimahullah ta'ala, on alcohol. According to Abu Hanifa, rahimahullah ta'ala, transporting alcohol to a dhimmi, a non-Muslim who lives under Muslim rule, if you transport alcohol to him, is permissible. Why? He separates between transported and the usage of it. The dhimmi, according to them, may use the khamra in something halal, like takhleel. Both the opinion on transporting the khamra and building of churches are wrong. Both of them are wrong. Now, where some get, the Abu Hanifa said, you get ajr for building or renovating a church, is either clear tadlis, clear deceit, or someone who's ignorant and needs to watch what they spread. And inshallah, it's only the latter. Someone who hasn't taken from ulama or read books on ulama should be careful what he says. And let me show you how dangerous that is from this example. In Al-Fatawa Al-Hindiyya and other Hanafi reference books, Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala said about a Muslim who's contracted to build a church, he said about it, Jaza wa yatibu lahu al-ajr. The statement of Abu Hanifa says it's permissible for him to construct it and get the ajr. Ajr here was ignorantly or deceitfully mistranslated into ajr from Allah when it meant monetary compensation for the work. Ajr in Arabic comes in the context of reward from Allah. Many hadith and verses. Inna Allah indahu ajrun azim. Or it comes in the context of being compensated by someone for doing a job. In the hadith, أعطوا الأجير أجره, give the hired worker's wages before his sweat dries. His word يطيب له means صار حلالا. Abu Hanifa didn't mean he gets ajr from Allah. There's absolutely no way that can be taken as that. He meant ajr as in wages, meaning he can accept the wages. Meaning the ruling on that is that he can accept the wages. I feel it's ridiculous and absurd for me to waste a moment to respond to such a detail, but several brothers, sent me the same question recently. And usually that happens after someone either mentioned it in a lecture or some type of article or something of that nature. If it was done by tadlis and deceit, it amazes me the extent one would go in tadlis, in tampering of the deen of Allah, to justify building doomed establishments for the kuffar and mushrikeen. Now, as to the opinion of Abu Hanifa, he said it's permissible for them to have churches in the outskirts of Muslim lands, only if they're fully populated by non-Muslims. The Hanafi madhab itself strongly rejected that and condemned that opinion. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala be pleased with them and with Abu Hanifa. This shows you how unbiased they were. And that's why I said all four of the madhahib are against this matter. They're in agreement on this matter. The response to Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala comes from the imams of the Hanafi madhab before anyone else. And that's really all you really need to read. His top two companions, his top two famous companions, Imam Abu Yusuf and Imam Muhammad ibn al-Hasan al-Shaybani, rejected that opinion. Muhammad ibn al-Hasan had among the most firm statements on this matter. He said there shouldn't be left a single church or place of worship in the lands of the Muslimin. Subki, he's Shafi'i, he's not Hanafi, but he attempted to explain. He had a fatwa on this matter, and he tried to explain Abu Hanifa's opinion. He said it appears what Abu Hanifa meant, that it's only okay for them to build places of worship in small towns that they have, where they live in, if it's fully occupied by them with absolutely no Muslims amongst them. And it has to be in the outskirts. Then As-Subki went on to indicate even that is wrong. He said the other ulama prohibit even that because it's in the lands of the Muslimin and under their control, so they cannot build or construct churches. When I mentioned the ijma' earlier, I said Az-Zayla'i الزيلعي related the ijma'. The author of Tabyin al-Haqa'iq. He's one of the imams of the Hanafiya. As-Sarkhasi, and it's also mentioned, pronounced As-Sarakhsi. Both are proper. As-Sarakhsi may be more proper in pronunciation. In Radd al-Muhtar, he said, and he's one of the imams of the Hanafi madhab. He's not just anyone, he's one of the imams. He said, the madhab on this is that it's not permissible to build places of worship for non-Muslims in small towns for anyone. He's Hanafi, and a giant of the Hanafi madhab, who went to prison and wrote among the best of his books in prison. He said, the madhab is that it's not permissible for any of the various fractions of kuffar and mushrikeen to construct churches or places of worship in the lands of the Muslimin. He said, one should not look to a fatwa beyond this. He said, it's not permissible to follow a fatwa that churches are permissible in small towns or in the outskirts. Nor is it permissible to abide by or accept it. And whoever gives such a fatwa should be interdicted from giving fatwas, because that's following one's whims and desires, and because that goes against the proof. Now he's a Hanafi. The bottom line on this matter is that Muslim territories are divided into three categories as it pertains to this matter. Territories founded and established on Tawheed in Islam from the beginning. Territories conquered by force. The ruling for both of those is the same. There can't be no places of worship in those territories other than the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wahdahu la sharika lah. Places of worship for other than Allah have no room in those territories, old or new. The third type of territory is territories that were conquered through peace treaties by the Imam. In that situation, the Imam may allow them to keep what they have without public exposure or display of their shirk and kufr, and without being allowed to renovate or rebuild it if it's decayed or destroyed over time. And we said, the ulama mentioned the issue of minor restoration, and we said the correct opinion on that little detail is even that is not permissible. Having said that, this issue is among the many contemporary issues that unmask the munafiqeen of our time. When they come from politically motivated agendas and they attain their orders from their superiors, not from the Quran and Sunnah, you see the double standards and nifaq in this issue. You see those who are pro-Turkey, pro-Qatar, attacking what's referred to as UAE for a Hindu temple. When Qatar and Turkey themselves have churches, to us, they're all the same in this matter, because we speak from the pure foundation of the Quran and Sunnah and the true manhaj of the Salaf, the pure Tawheed. The Hindu temples and places of shirk in what's referred to as UAE, or what's referred to as Qatar, or the cathedrals in Kuwait, and no different than that, and worse than that is the Husayniyat that they have in Bilad al-Haramain. And like that is the Husayniyat that are allowed in Afghanistan, or even in Iraq, in Egypt, and elsewhere throughout the Muslim territories. They're all the same in this matter. Worse than that is when kufr and shirk is allowed to be practiced openly and publicly while being protected and defended. Or when the construction of their doomed establishments are completed, they're celebrated and attended. This issue is an example of the many contemporary matters that will tell you who are the pirates of the da'wah of Imam Muhammad bin Abdul Wahhab and who are the genuine pure guardians of the manhaj of the Salaf, the followers of the pure Tawheed and the followers of Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab. To those extremists in obedience to their rulers who give precedence to what they do and say over the Quran and Sunnah, build in places of shirk is haram. But if their rulers do it, they'll find the justification. Just like interfaith. It's kufr to them. But if the rulers do it, it's exempted, and the list goes on. They'll rightfully tear into a modernist or some figure or head who attends and promotes interfaith. But when their rulers do it or promote it from Mecca, they'll find a way out for them. Counterfeit mock Salafis. They're the sham, bogus followers of Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab. Explain to me what type of Salafism they're on, and how do they even have the audacity to even mention or touch the books of Muhammad bin Abdul Wahhab, let alone teach them, when the da'wah of Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab rahimahullah ta'ala was centered on establishing pure tawheed, and more precisely, it's the ijma' of the globe, the universal globe, enemies and followers of the da'wah, that the da'wah of Imam Muhammad bin Abdul Wahhab was notorious and blatant for demolishing symbols of shirk throughout the lands that they controlled and ruled. Their tawaghit establish and construct temples of shirk and protect it and guard it and participate and celebrate and rejoice in its opening. Some boldly justify it while others are silent. Others pretend to be overly occupied in talking about the bid'ah of the Mawlid. Because, of course, the Tawaghit don't care about that issue. They can quarrel about that as long as they want. At the same time that temples of shirk are being constructed and celebrated in the lands that your Messenger ﷺ died, deterring from that. I know a brother who took on a big duty in his life that took its toll on him and his family. His family complained to me to resolve that issue and to tell him to stop. I asked him why he so strongly holds on to that particular task. Rather, it's a deed, it's something good. He said, my father's last advice on his deathbed was to do this, and I'll continue to do it, insha'Allah, at all costs. He loved his father. He knows what his father's last advice on his deathbed meant. We love Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That's why we hold on dearly to the advice he gave on his deathbed, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Yes, no doubt, the Mawlid is a bid'ah, but it doesn't compare in severity to the horrendous act of opening a shirk temple on Al-Jazira Al-Arabiya. Some in the past gave fatwas against building shirk establishments in Muslim lands, but now turn a blind eye and are even part of the inner circle of the Tawaghit to violate that. And they have the audacity to accuse others of changing. The ulama were discussing the issue of allowing kuffar themselves to open places of worship for themselves in Muslim lands. Now it's Tawaghit opening places of shirk in Muslim lands. The Murji'a rejects and their Tawaghit are not followers of Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab, rahimahullah. They're followers of Amr ibn Amir ibn Luhay, the man who revived shirk in the Arabian Peninsula and changed the deen in millah of Ibrahim in the Arabian Peninsula. In Bukhari and Muslim, the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, I saw Amr dragging his intestines in Jahannam because he was the first who devoted animals to shirk. They're reviving the da'wah of Amr ibn Luhay, who brought shirk from Asham to the Arabian Peninsula and altered the pure tawheed of Millat Ibrahim. They should be ashamed to utter the word they like to mention, that they're Salafis. Unless when they say they're Salafi, that their Salaf is Amr ibn Luhay, then we can accept that. Day after day, they're unmasked and their reality appears clear and clear for the slow ones. They falsely cling onto the da'wah of Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab to gain legitimacy when he's free from them. And if he was alive, from what we know of his manhaj and what we learned and what we taught of his books and what we know of his history, he would be cleansing Al-Jazira Al-Arabiya from some of his own blood and flesh offspring there today. That's not even getting into the issue of the betrayal of the Muslims in this matter. 16 million to build a shirk temple so they can worship peacefully, while at the same time they're demolishing masajid and killing our brothers and sisters. And also, what I would want to add to this is, some say if we stop them from building places of worship in our lands, they won't allow us to do so in their lands. And the response to that, if that's the case, let it be so. That's fine. It'll just be another matter. They deny Muslims, no different than the issue of niqab or the other obligations that they deny Muslims from. We hold on firm to the teachings of our Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Let's assume they do ban all the masajid. Warding off evil takes precedence over bringing benefits. Warding off the evil of having places of shirk in our lands takes precedence over the benefit of establishing masajid in their lands. Don't worry about it. Salah in your house is accepted. In their lands, they deny Muslimat the right to wear niqab and polygamy and other matters. So this will be no different. Building places of worship in any of the territories of the Muslim lands, especially Al Jazeera, is an invitation for people to join shirk and kufr. And also, if anyone objects to this, especially from the modernists, tell them, and the Murji'a as well, tell them the Vatican sits on 121 acres. 57 acres of it is gardens. Go ask them for a few acres so we can build a masjid there. Let's see if that's possible. No one criticizes that. It's okay to keep a strong hold of shirk and abuse of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but we can't keep a fort of tawheed and praise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I'll conclude with 3 rulings on this matter. The first one, by Abu al-Hasan al-Ash'ari and Ibn Taymiyyah and Bakr Abu Zayd rahimahullah. Abu al-Hasan al-Ash'ari, as in al-Furuq lil-Qarafi, considered it kufr to build churches. Ibn Taymiyyah said, whoever believes that churches are the houses of Allah, Hindu temples and all other various places of worship for the kuffar are the same. So whoever believes churches are the houses of Allah and that Allah is worshipped in them, or what Jews and Christians do is ibadah and nearness to Allah, or if he likes what they do or is pleased with it, celebrating the opening, that's aside from building it. Or if he aids them in opening their places of worship and in establishing their deen and considers that nearness and obedience to Allah, then he is a kafir. And as we concluded previously with the question about children going to schools in the West, we concluded with a statement from Sheikh Bakr Abu Zayd, and I'll do the same with that here as well. He has a book called Khasa'is Al-Jazira Al-Arabiyya, the specialties of the Arabian Peninsula. He said a kafir can't establish a church or any place of worship or any statue, because Al-Jazira Al-Arabiyya must be pure from false religions, and due to the many ahadith on that. He also mentioned that the Imam himself is not allowed to permit that. Nor is he allowed to let it remain, whether it's new or old. He mentioned it in the context of the Arabian Peninsula because the book was pertaining to that matter. But that ruling applies to all Muslim territories. Finally, let me add another thing, is that when I was very young, maybe 12 years old or so. There was a book that I recommend, if it's still around. It's among the best books that compile proofs and the opinions of ulama on this matter. It's called Hukum Bina al-Kana'is, for one of the Sheikh of our Shuyukh, Ismail ibn Muhammad al-Ansari. It was freshly published and widely circulated back when my father was studying in Medina and we were children. Back then there was no internet and other matters that occupy people's time. In fact, there wasn't even but one TV channel, and it was only on for a few hours of the day. So people read more frequently, especially talabat al-ilm. So when new books like that were published, they were circulated for free, and they used to place them in the masajid or pass them around. Now they fully and openly violate what they previously published and what some gave a fatwa on. And the funny thing is that they change and they go around accusing others of changing. And that's just one of the examples of who really changes and who is really firm on Tawheed. I advise you to read that book, and we'll conclude with that.